We are days past the season-ending Chiefs-Broncos game, but we are still digging up artifacts and factoids and lessons from that game. This is the snap counts from the defense, courtesy Nick Jacobs on Twitter, and I've got some things worth talking about from this game on the defensive side. Just like yesterday, we did the offense. So if you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out, as that helps other Chiefs fans find this video. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. We're coming up on 2 years consecutive of daily uploads. So let's get into it. Notice here, there are 3 players right at the top here. 74 snaps, that is 100% of the snaps. Cam Jones, Jaden Hicks, and Brian Cook all played every defensive snap that there was to be played. Cam Jones played a lot of football, and it's possible that he just had a bad game. It's possible that his play was a symptom and not the sickness. It's possible that terrible defensive performance, Cam Jones was just running around the field trying to make up for other players that failed, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But it looked to me that based on assignment, based on effort, based on pursuit angles, based on a lot of things, Cam Jones might not be a Kansas City Chief next season. I didn't see anything in those 74 snaps that led me to believe that he is the next UDFA linebacker that is going to come into Kansas City and step up during a time of need, as the Kansas City Chiefs have had several UDFA linebackers do during the Brett Veach as general manager era. And I think that while he has been good on special teams, I don't know if that is enough upside to keep you on the roster, because basically, look, there are a handful of running backs in the NFL that have carries every week that were UDFA. Basically, Carson Steele is on his way to being one of them, I believe. He had a number of carries this year, but not every week. There are, by the same token, a number of linebackers in the league that are starters and get weekly snaps that are from the ranks of the UDFA. It is a very strange thing to watch in the NFL as the tides come in, the tides go out, the evolutions and revolutions on the field. 20 years ago, basically 20 years ago exactly, it was about 2005, that the NFL running back position started to slip off, and in that, so did the middle linebacker, the importance of the middle linebacker. And so you can find middle linebackers and you can find running backs as UDFAs that can come in and do things. Now, obviously, if I'm talking about 2005 and running backs that are UDFAs being able to come in and play, we are put back in the mindset of watching Priest Holmes, who was a UDFA in Baltimore and dominated the league. But that's the exception to the rule. What I'm talking about is basically the rule, that you can find running backs and linebackers. And I just don't know if contributing on special teams that way is enough to really keep you on the roster. Bring up the point, Jack Cochran. Jack Cochran has been on the roster for a couple years now, 3 years now, and he has never been more than a special teamer. I would venture to wager that if Jack Cochran were forced out there into a starting position, he would hold his own. He has exceptional athletic talent. Moving on, something that is maybe not even worth mentioning because of the framing and context here, Blake Lynch. Blake Lynch played 25 snaps and looked decent, as good as you could expect for someone who was signed that week and was immediately cut. Apparently, this was always the design. He was signed to have someone on the roster while Montrell Washington was cut to be able to pass through waivers because he had been called up 3 times during the season. Someone on the practice squad can only be called up 3 times. Then they have to be signed to the roster, or they have to be cut and clear waivers, and after they clear waivers, they can be added back to the practice squad. But in the postseason, that number resets. So Blake Lynch has been cut, Montreal Washington has been re-signed, and we will head into the playoffs with the same wide receivers on the practice squad. I accidentally threw Jaden Hicks in here with the linebackers, but it's easy to tell why I was confused. Jaden Hicks played a lot of football as well, 74 snaps. Previous high on the season was 53 snaps, which was just the previous week. Now, 74 snaps this past week, 53 snaps the week before. He has 330 snaps on the season. 202 of those snaps have come in the last 4 games. Jaden Hicks is a player on the rise. This is something that is either phenomenal or the Chiefs are really lucky every year. The Chiefs constantly have a player coming into his own heading into the playoffs. This year it is Jaden Hicks. Last year it was Chamari Connor. And this sort of thing is almost impossible to measure. It's almost impossible to measure the importance of something like this. This time of the year, all of these rosters are kind of bandaged together. They've got scotch tape around them, trying to let them limp into the next week. The Chiefs always have another player that is peaking, at least one player that is peaking at exactly the right time. Jaden Hicks peaking in this way is going to pay dividends for the Kansas City Chiefs as they enter the playoffs. He is a devastating safety, and I think that he really does have superstar potential. And watching him play more and more leading into the postseason is something that is very promising for this team heading into the playoffs. And you're looking at what amounts to a 3-game run. The Chiefs need to win the divisional round, the AFC Championship game, and then the Super Bowl. It is not a long and winding path. At this point, it is a sprint. That is the importance of peaking at the right time. Now, if I asked you how many tackles Joshua Uche had in that game, what would you say? I was super surprised when I went back and looked at the stats from that game. Joshua Uche played 50 snaps. I don't remember a single one of them. Joshua Uche had 8 tackles in that game. I do not remember a single one of them. 50 snaps, 8 tackles is actually a pretty good number. What was the quality of those snaps? I don't know. I maintain that I do not believe Joshua Uche will be back next year. I cannot fault Brett Veach for going out and making the effort, right? Pretend that Joshua Uche had paid off, that he was who he had been last season, or was it the season before, for the Patriots. If you were adding that guy to the defense, and you had Charles Omenihu coming back, and you had Jaden Hicks peaking at exactly the right time, there'd be no stopping these Kansas City Chiefs. Didn't work out, didn't give up a whole lot in order to get Joshua Uche, so I'm not upset that Brett Veach made the trade. It is tough, by that same token, to see Charles Omenihu playing 50 snaps in an absolutely meaningless game. Look, there's a couple things maybe at play there. I am not 100% sure which one was feeding more into this. The Kansas City Chiefs had to put somebody on the field. Someone had to play in the football game. It's rough that a guy who was coming off of a long-term injury had to be out there in that way, but he was. On the positive side, as long as he didn't get too dinged up, as long as he doesn't have any shiners coming out of that game, he's going to be in better shape for the postseason. Nothing gets you in that shape like playing football. Charles Omenihu has played very little football the past 2 seasons. He came into last season suspended for 8 weeks. He came into this season with an ACL injury. Staying on that defensive line, something that is very interesting to note, and I'm not sure exactly what to read into it. Marlon Tuipulotu played 48 snaps. Derek Nottie played 47. It seems to me that these two were likely auditioning for a place as a reserve defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs next season. Derek Nottie, I didn't notice a whole lot. Never thought to actually consciously take notes on what it was that he was doing during the game, so that's on me, but nothing stands out. And I thought Tuipulotu, but in fairness, I was watching for Tuipulotu. I wanted to see Tuipulotu. I thought that he looked like an athletic defensive tackle. I thought that he looked like he could move. I thought that he looked like at times he had a little bit of burst. I think that he has strong hands. I don't think he uses them very well. So if you can teach him how to use his hands better, it's possible that he becomes a pretty decent defensive tackle. I think that is the problem with him. I think that is what is going on there, because watching his feet, I don't know that, he was constantly moving forward. I don't know exactly what else you want from a great big defensive tackle that you were hoping to be a run stuffer. Now, Felix Enudike Uzama. FAU played 52 snaps and only had 3 tackles. He did have a tackle for loss, but only 3 tackles. Now, perhaps this is the right place for further judgment on an uneventful career. Lord knows I have done that to FAU during the course of this channel. When FAU was drafted, basically the first thing out of my mouth was, I think that this is Mike Dana. I think this guy's ceiling is Mike Dana. It's rough to take Mike Dana. Mike Dana is a great player to have on the team. He's not a great player. Mike Dana is a nice piece. Mike Dana is not a first rounder. I think that's FAU's ceiling. I still think that that is FAU's ceiling, but I actually think he had a pretty good game against the Broncos. Here's why. Sometimes I think that you can do your scouting through the opponent's coaches. If you show up to a high school football game knowing nothing about it, and there's a team playing offense, and there's a modestly sized wide receiver on the field, but standing across from that wide receiver are 3 cornerbacks, what are you going to do? I'm watching that wide receiver. What is going on here? They've got him triple covered. They are stacking a single wide receiver. Got to figure this out. That's kind of what was happening to FAU during the course of that game. The Broncos' offensive coaches, it seemed to me, were game planning around FAU. He was often double teamed. He was often chipped. There was times where they would roll away from FAU. Now, it could be that is all completely coincidental. It could be that was all, hey, we're going to run our plays regardless of who is out there on defense. We're going to do them this way, and we're going to practice double teaming the defensive end. Maybe. Kind of hard when it's pretty consistent, and it seemed that way to me. So it seems that perhaps FAU was getting more respect from coaches, from opposing coaches, than from his own fan base, myself included. Now, one thing that was confusing to me, and again, I'm not saying anybody made the wrong call. Obviously, I'm a guy talking into a microphone on YouTube, but it was confusing for me to see that Christian Roland-Wallace only played 26 snaps, especially when Brian Cook played 74 snaps. Maybe Brian Cook needed the conditioning. I don't know. Or is it possible that Christian Roland-Wallace figures more heavily into this team's plans for the playoffs? I don't see that being the case, But when you're talking about a completely meaningless game, and Bryan Cook is a veteran that did not necessarily, in my opinion, need the reps, why would he be out there more than Christian Roland-Wallace, who Christian Roland-Wallace could play the position that was manned by Bryan Cook, couldn't he? I believe. I mean, maybe this is just not something he was cross-trained to do, but I would imagine that it doesn't matter anyway. You're giving bombs away to the Denver Broncos, which we're going to talk about next with Najee Johnson. But Christian Roland-Wallace, who I think probably figures into the future plans for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that they would like to have him around. That's why they've probably kept him on the active roster all season, despite the fact that at times he was not playing a whole lot of football. If you keep him on the active roster, you get to utilize and maintain his 3-year UDFA contract. That seems to be part of the plan for the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't see him factoring into the postseason heavier than does Bryan Cook, but maybe that's the case. Now, the last two notes here. Najee Johnson. Najee Johnson was targeted 6 times in that game. He gave up 5 receptions for 104 yards and a touchdown. That's a 158.3 rating. He gave up a 158.3 rating to a rookie quarterback. Now, by the way, if you were not aware, the rating on a passer rating is a very strange statistic. A perfect passer rating is 158.3. Najee Johnson gave up a perfect passer rating to Bo Nix during the course of that game. And, by the way, that was the second time Najee Johnson had surrendered a 158.3 passer rating during this season. The other time was against Buffalo. Buffalo, I don't know if you've heard, is in the playoffs. The Broncos, don't know if you've heard, are in the playoffs. So I think we could be approaching the end of the line for the Najee Johnson experiment, at least as far as the cornerback number 2 position is concerned. Adding to that, Joshua Williams. Joshua Williams, by the way, just had an interview with Kay Adams, and I forgot just how much Joshua Williams looks like he's 14 years old. The guy looks like he's getting ready for his freshman year in college. Very baby-faced individual. But Joshua Williams played 51 snaps. Joshua Williams in that game played 51 snaps, was targeted twice, and gave up 1 reception for 7 yards. That is a far cry from being targeted 6 times, giving up 5 receptions for 104 yards. I forgot how many snaps Najee Johnson played. Najee Johnson played... Where are we? Joshua Williams played 51 snaps. Najee Johnson played 63 snaps. So he played 12 more snaps, was targeted 4 more times, gave up 4 more receptions. So I think that cornerback number 2 spot is going to be very interesting heading into the postseason, especially as we may see the return of Jaylen Watson. And if we do see the return of Jaylen Watson, it'll be good for the defense so long as he looks like he's in shape. He's definitely in shape. Is he in condition? That is harder to tell. But yeah, Jaylen Watson's going to be difficult moving forward. Jaylen Watson absolutely looks the part of a number 2 cornerback. Jaylen Watson makes the defense infinitely tougher to pass on, to throw against when he is out there than when he is not. Jaylen Watson is a very large cornerback. Jaylen Watson has an interesting blend of size, speed, explosion, etc. He has a great story. I love the stories of those guys who picked themselves up by the bootstraps the way he did and played himself into the NFL. He's also injury prone. Do you throw a bag at a guy who gets injured every year? Makes the defense a lot better. I think we will know more after the NFL draft. There are quite a few corners in this draft that I think on whom I think Brett Veach might have his eye. It's easy to sit here and say they don't need a corner. They need an offensive tackle in the first round. They need another wide receiver in the first round. They have very few wide receivers returning. They have a number one cornerback in Trent McDuffie. This defense gets a whole lot tougher when there's two big-time cornerbacks. You saw that last year, despite the fact that the Chiefs ended for all intents and purposes, ended the season yielding just 18 points per game. Now, the Broncos game skewed that, and it is higher than that now, but during the games that mattered, they were giving up very few points. Anyway, that is what I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and hope to have you back for the next one.